Oh my gosh.
I know.
This is not.
You were good.
Tiffany's gonna walk in.
And weren't you on our team or the?
Millennials.
I graciously
Never.
declined to participate, knowing
Well, we all miss.
how bad my spelling abilities are.
Series totally messed me up. I used to be good at spelling.
It's 7 o'clock on the dot. So I just want to start by thanking all of you for coming. I know it's been a big day. You were at the senior center before this, and I know that you guys have been doing lots of campaigning and work, so I appreciate you taking the time to come out for organizations. We also want to go ahead and thank the city of Saline for allowing us to have this event here. We just want to make sure everybody knows that this is not a city or school-sponsored event. This event is sponsored by Saline Supports Our Community and by Saline Parents Against Racism. So I'll start by introducing myself. I'm Kirsten Woodside, and I'm here tonight representing SPAR, Saline Parents Against Racism.
I'm Heather Finch. I'm here representing Saline Supports Our Community.
And then before we begin, we also just want to give acknowledgement that this is the first year the city is recognizing Indigenous Peoples Day instead of Columbus Day. So I just wanted to point that out to all of you and think about the land that we're on, where it came from, and how we got the land that we're sitting on as well.
For the forum, we will be asking questions from our organizations as well as one sent in from community members.
So the first thing is we just want everyone to go through, state your name, who you are, and just give a very brief introduction on yourself and what called you to run for office. And we'll just start with Mayor Merle, because he's right over there.
Okay, thank you both very much. I'm segregated this evening because I'm getting over a little bout of a strep throat. But it is I'm delighted to be with everyone this evening, and thanks to those who will be watching us remotely either later this evening or in the weeks and days ahead. I'm Brian Marl. I'm mayor of the city of Saline. I've been mayor since January of 2013. Prior to my election as mayor in 2012, I served 2 terms on city council, beginning in 2009 and then reelected in 2010. On my mother's side of the family, we have been in the Saline area since the 1850s. We are deeply passionate about this community. We love Saline. We think it has we think the Saline community more broadly, not just the city, has a very bright future and it's worth fighting for. I'm deeply passionate about a couple issues: economic development, strong financial stewardship, diversity, equity, and inclusion, investment in our infrastructure, and openness and transparency in policymaking. And I look forward to speaking to some of those issues later this evening. Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Shannon Beeman. I'm County Commissioner for District 3, which encompasses the city of Saline, the city of Milan, the village of Manchester, and the surrounding townships, basically the southwestern corner of Washtenaw County. I have been in this role for 2 terms, was elected in 2018 and reelected in 2020. I'm excited to continue the work that we're doing within Washtenaw County. We did hire on the first ever diversity equity officer to the county, and it's become a real focus of our investments and how we look at providing services throughout Washtenaw County, always having that equity lens. So I've been in Michigander all my life. My husband's family's been farming in western Washtenaw County for hundreds of years. I'm one of those Beemans, if you know any. And so just excited to participate tonight.
Hi, I'm Dean Gerbach. I've been a member of our community in my entire life. Like Mr. Morrow, I've also have family that's been here for a long time in tradition. My service so far has been in 2 different terms. I first served 6 years for the city council, and then again, right now I'm completing a 12-year term. I did take a little break in between. My background, of course, was at the University of Michigan in finance and administration, and I retired a couple years ago. My reasoning for running is this is my community. I wanted to give back. I've been here and working towards a number of things over the years, and we're succeeding. I want to continue to complete my biggest project right now, and I've served on the task force for both wastewater treatment and a number of those aspects. I want to see us get our water wastewater plant done, and I want to see us move forward. I currently also serve as the president and co-treasurer for the Saline Historical Society. I'm very deep into our historical roots, making sure that we show and benefit from the businesses that we have in terms of our historic representation and our society and so forth. And also, I own a property downtown. I'm very dedicated into the downtown, making sure it's successful and that we move forward on that aspect. And also, I like to make sure that we are a community that reaches out, is equitable, and supports our all fellow citizens. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Janet Dillon. I am a city council member seeking re-election to a 5th term. I was first elected in 2014. I am not from Saline originally. My family chose to move here in 2007, and this is where we have raised our children and love our community. I chose to get involved in city government as my previous life and career was spent in the legal field, and I love policies and procedures. And so this was a good fit for me. I was also, as a community member, I was very engaged, still remain engaged. I consider myself to be sort of a career volunteer. So I've been involved in a lot of aspects of our schools, our communities, our civic organizations, and a lot of other groups. As far as my priorities, as far as for the city, obviously, first and foremost is, infrastructure at this point. And diversity, equity, and inclusion is always an issue that's in the forefront of our community. And I'm looking forward to continuing moving those efforts forward. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lori Sames, and I'm running for a seat on the Saline Area Schools Board of Education. So I grew up near Saline in Dexter, Michigan, moved to Saline in 2007 when I was relocating back to the U.S. after living and working for a period of 2 years in Europe with my job. I work for a Fortune 500 organization where I run their global cybersecurity practice. So my direct organization is made up of individuals across North America, Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. So I'm very well versed in working with different cultures, different ideals, ensuring everyone has a seat at the table, that everyone feels as though their voice is being heard and their opinion is being respected, and to work together to get to what, feels like an equitable outcome for everyone involved. So I feel that that's kind of the differentiating factor that I have to bring onto the school board. I was raised by a single mom who was a public educator. She's now retired, and my sibling is also a public educator. I'm very passionate about the Institute of Public Education, and I feel that education is extremely powerful, and oftentimes when we're uncomfortable with a topic or a situation, it may be because we need to be more educated on that topic and learn more about it to become more comfortable.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nicole Rice. I am a resident of the Historic District up on North Ann Arbor Street. I've lived here for about 6 years now. I came here from Washington, D.C., where I spent 10 years working for a variety of organizations as a communications professional. I worked for the military, a congressional organization. And we are a service-oriented family. My spouse is retired military. So we feel like service is part of who we are and part of everything that we wish to do within our community. I believe that I will bring a good, keen sense of communications to the city council. One of the things that I would like to see from city council and what I would like to strive for is to connect with the residents. We have multiple segments of the community here, from our seniors to new families moving into the district, to single families. I would like to reach out to those different segments of the community, see what their needs are, and have good open communications about what the city is trying to work on, what the city is trying to accomplish, as well as what the needs of different segments of the community are. I currently work for the federal government in a research facility where I translate really difficult technical information and put it into terms that the community and those who are receiving our services understand. So that's what I think I can bring to the city of Saline. Thanks.
Hello, my name's Robert Cameron. You can call me Bob. I've been a Saline resident for about 11 years. I came here when I married my wife, and we raised a wonderful stepchild here in Saline. And because of that, I've really come to love this place and call it home. And so I'm running to help be a part of it and build a good future for it. I'm a graphic designer with a background in urban planning. So part of why I'm running is to kind of help help grow our city in a more sustainable and inclusive way. So thanks.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kristen Hoffman-Peevler. I have lived here since 2009. I've got 2 kids in the Saline schools, and I'm running for school board. I have spent the 14 years that we have lived here dedicated to service for the schools, from classroom volunteer to PTA to book fair queen to sex ed advisory board for the last 5.5 years or so. And I feel that this is the next step for me in service to our community. I believe in whole child learning. I believe in free and fair public education for every student, and to make sure that every student has what they need in order to be successful, to grow here and go out into the world and be servants for their communities someday. Thanks.
Great. My name is Michael McVeigh. I am running for re-election to the Saline Area Schools Board of Education. I was elected in 2016, started in 2017. Just a quick bit of background. It's interesting that we all shared our deep roots. I was 30 years in Canada, born to immigrant parents there, and so I shoveled 30 years in Canada before I came to Arizona. Spent 15 years there, and I've been in Saline for the last 15 years. I'm a K-12 educator. I've been involved in K-12 for over 40 years. I was a high school teacher of special education in English in Canada, and in Japan, and in Tucson, Arizona, same thing. And then somehow I fell into higher education and became a professor of education. My job, in a nutshell, is teaching new teachers how to use technology in the classroom. My daughter graduated from Saline in 2013, and that is her experiences that showed me just how passionate, concerned, supportive, and caring this district is. And since coming to the school board 6 years ago, I have only doubled down my attitudes and support for this district. I'm looking forward to another 4 years on the board to help guide through a lot of the projects I had worked on with fellow board members, including the DEI committee. But we'll talk more about that later, I'm quite certain. Perhaps.
My name is Dr. Lauren Gold. I'm a pediatrician and a Saline parent and volunteer. I moved to Saline in 2009 when my eldest was starting kindergarten, and he is now a college freshman. I'm running for the Saline Schools Board of Education seat, and I'm doing so for several reasons. My whole professional, personal focus has been on children, and so this is another way to work on the policies that affect our kids. I want to focus on continued opportunity for our students in the form of continued academic excellence in our schools, technical and vocational opportunities, and opportunities for our special ed students. I want to focus on the health and safety, both mental and physical, of our students, teachers, and staff. I'd like to work in a way where we place facts first and listen to science. And so I pledge to make decisions based on facts and evidence. And I'd like to continue to move forward in a future-focused way on our diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives.
All right, thank you all for that, and you all kept it brief, which is nice. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna ask everybody the same questions, but I'm gonna do chunks of like 4 people, and go on, and then towards the end, then I'll ask questions specific for the board, people that are running for the board, and the people that are running for a local Saline government office. So the first question is going to be for the first 4 folks up there. So Saline has received negative news attention for acts of bigotry. What steps would you take to make new or current residents feel safe and welcome here? And also, the other point is, how would you support survivors who are often not believed in this community when they speak up against these acts happening to them and their families?
You want me to start again?
Sure, you can start again.
Repeat the question for everyone's benefit, just one more time, Kirsten. Thank you.
Sure. Saline has received negative news attention for acts of bigotry. What steps would you take to make new or current residents feel safe and welcome here? And how would you support survivors who are often not believed in the community?
Let me take the second part of that question first. I think it's incumbent upon leaders in any community to speak up, support the marginalized, the victimized, those who do not feel welcome or safe in any particular jurisdiction. I think that, in my position as mayor specifically, I think that is of paramount importance, to be a resource, to be an advocate, to be a friend, and to be a supporter. And that's what I will have done, and that's what I will continue to do moving forward, because everybody deserves to feel safe and welcome in the Saline community. Excuse me. I think that, to the first part of Kirsten's question, in early 2020, we were in the news for intolerance, bigotry, which I think is sort of a malignancy in any community. And it has a ripple effect, and it's very detrimental. And I use that word malignant strategically. So moving forward, what do we need to do? Well, one, we need to continue to strengthen and encourage our city-established DEI committee and provide them the resources necessary for them to pursue new initiatives to promote inclusion and equity in the broader Saline community. The city of Saline specifically needs to continue to mandate DEI training for all staff members. We should also look to open that up to community members and area stakeholders. Those are just a few things that I have worked on and would support. But this is a key priority for me, and I think the city more broadly moving forward.
Thank you. I'll answer in order of the questions. So I'll start with, I think Saline has really started to turn the corner in terms of including the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee, as well as recognizing things like Indigenous Peoples Day and Pride Month and things of that nature. I think being out and open and really highlighting the best of our community, because we are at our best when we're all at the table, when we all feel that we have an equal space and equal voice. I love sharing best practices that we have in the county and that I learn every day from Elise Asbury Payne, our racial equity officer. So that's a space that I feel I can contribute as well, as just bringing resources to the community to expand upon the great work that you're already doing. As for the second part of the question, I feel that we have to call it out. We have to call out racism. We have to call out bigotry. We have to call out hate. It lives here. It isn't, that doesn't happen in my community. It does. It happens in your community every single day, to your neighbors, to your friends, to people who are just visiting the community. And how they feel matters. The feeling you get coming into Saline and coming into Washtenaw County as a whole really matters. And so understanding those truths and accepting those truths and accepting the own prejudice that we all bring to the table, whether we're aware of it or not, and being open to education, to working with one another, to understanding one another, is another huge piece. So just, again, reflecting, calling it out, it does live here, but how do we drive it out, and how do we encourage that joy that we have when our community is diverse and when we do celebrate everyone?
And for me, understanding it and seeing it, we are a white predominantly city. And understanding what individuals are feeling and what's occurring to them is something that we have to give a voice to. And I think, as Ms. Beeman has mentioned, when these incidents occur, we need to actually talk as a community. We need to come together and discuss what is going on. Having those type of groups, having individuals come in to actually express what's going on, lecturers, individuals that have written books, those type of experts, and getting the community to understand. I mean, even just recently, I was watching the Holocaust presentation that Ken Burns did on PBS, and really to understand the bigotry and the attitude that happened during World War II in the United States. I don't think we focused enough on those type of things to understand it, and we as a community need to be able to even understand our own history to really realize and recognize this isn't something new. It's exactly what, we have either encouraged or discouraged, depending on what it is. In terms of my own behavior, we are leaders. We need to make sure that we bring this forward. We need to make sure that we're identifying it. I have my own page that I called Et al, that I try to bring information that I feel is relevant to individuals on Facebook to see what's going on. I also believe that we need to really talk and present to individuals how we as a community can move forward. This isn't something that's going away. It's becoming even more and more of an issue from the federal, from the state level. We have to deal with it, and I don't know from a perspective of where many of the individuals in our community want to be. I mean, we do say things, but do we really mean it? And we have to bring that out and communicate that way. And going forward, I believe we do need to support. I would like to see more of this grassroots development. I think your community, Saline Supports and some of those actually have more of an initiative to do those type of things than sometimes a government, because a government has its restrictions, also has its, red tape and bureaucracy. So many of those things that can really be changed come from the individuals of the community. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll start by saying that every time I hear the phrase Saline doesn't have racism, it just makes me stop. It stops my entire body. I just think that if anybody actually believes that, they're just lying to themselves. We've made some strides forward. We absolutely have. It's a long road to travel. And I think collaboration with our community, and I'm speaking from a government standpoint, from committees, our community, our county, is going to be the key, our schools. And everybody has to have a voice in this. We're never going to succeed in silos. And so that is where I'm hoping things are going to move in that direction. We've really got some good collaboration going on now, and I think we can take it to the next level moving forward. As far as trainings, and sometimes in our community, racism is very obvious. Sometimes it's sort of hidden among us. And I think we do, as has been previously said, we need to identify that. We need to acknowledge it. And we need to make sure that we move forward from it. And that's the piece where I feel as though we're in a growth stage of how do we move forward, because we sort of stall a bit. And I'm really hoping that what we will see is that collaborative effort. As far as individuals that have experienced any kind of diversity or racism or any other type of issue, I think what I can bring to the table is empathy. That's what I can bring to the table for them. And everyone needs to feel safe. That's a non-negotiable. I mean, I don't think that that's an earned right. That's just a human right. And I'd like to see us focus more on that, on the equity piece. Thank you.
Okay, the next question is for four more of you, I think. So,
Three more.
three more?
Three more, because we're gonna
Okay.
we'll do Lori, Nicole, and Bob. All right, so, for the next three of you, Lori, Nicole, and Bob, transgender people in America face a host of unique challenges and discrimination in their daily life. What will you do in your role to create a community where transgender people are free to live as their most authentic selves without fear of discrimination?
So the first thing I'll say is I think it's good that we're having these conversations. If I think back to when I was in middle school and high school, I don't think we'd be engaged in these conversations because I don't think individuals would feel that they would have any level of support if they were to bring these topics up. So I'm glad to see that some level of progress has been made, understanding we still have a lot more to do. From a transgender perspective, since I'm coming from a Board of Ed view, or lens, I guess I should say, no child wants to feel as though they're being canceled, and every child at the end of the day wants to feel as though they're being affirmed, and that the community and trusted adults, which includes educators as well as members of the community, are going to support those individuals. I think that everyone needs to feel as though they have a voice within our school district. I do think we need to potentially look at some of the policies we have around hate speech, we have around discrimination, and we have around bullying. I don't feel in all cases that, I guess, the disciplinary action is to the level that it should be. I think there's some reform that could be done there. I've done quite a bit of research in this area, and I know that there's varying opinions on the subject, but I think some level of reform in our disciplinary actions to ensure that students understand the significance, the offender anyway, of the actions that they're taking are truly understood. At the end of the day, I want all students in our district to be successful in pursuit of their life goals, whether that is higher education or moving immediately into employment upon graduation. And, you know, parents within the district and students within the district need to understand that organizations celebrate these types of things. And you're not expected to just, you know, understand. You're expected to really support these types of events and these different, like, as an example, right now we're in Hispanic Heritage Month. I know that's a little off topic to the question, but you're expected to support these different communities of individuals and really lean in and show your support. And so part of that is educating our students that this is something that they're going to be expected to do when they leave our district, and so we need to start learning now.
I think from a city perspective, I give kudos to our city administration for already getting ahead of some of the gender neutrality that we may have not had in some of our policies in the past. As a city council member, I would like to look further into those. Things like gender neutral bathrooms, just language within our policies, taking gender out of our language, making it more neutral. I think those are very subtle but important ways and good first steps as a city government. Secondly, I think we need to celebrate those who are able to be out and who are able to express themselves in the manner in which they would like to express themselves, or in the manner in which they deserve to express themselves. I think that this is a topic that we have tiptoed around for a very long time, especially in the schools. But I think that the more that we talk about this, the more that we put gender-neutral language into our vocabulary, the more that we understand that even if we don't quite understand it, it doesn't matter, because the only thing that matters is kindness and making people feel included. It doesn't matter if I don't understand, you know, how you feel the way that you feel. I just need to understand that it's the way you feel and validate it. So as a city council member, I think, first of all, again, looking at policies, looking at language and communications and how we communicate to our community is step one. Step two is just incorporating it into our lives more, incorporating that we have transgender members of our community. We should celebrate them, and we should include them and make ourselves accessible to them and all of our city services accessible to them. And then thirdly, I think we need to, as a city, cooperate a little bit more closely with the schools. Because what happens in the schools happens in the city, and what happens in the city happens in the schools. And a lot of the transgender issues, if you will, that are coming up are starting in the schools. So how can the city make sure that our policies and our actions mesh with our views on making sure that children feel included and making sure that they feel safe in the city environment? Thanks.
Hi, yeah. So I think, again, coming from a city council perspective, I would say that, city council and city leaders do have a responsibility of creating a culture of kindness in Saline. And, leadership starts from the top in that regard. But also very specifically, looking at the city policies that are in place, what barriers are in place that might create fear among transgender folks. So just off the top of my head, I'm thinking of access to health care or access to housing. And those are things that, like I said, are there barriers that are somehow encoded into our laws that are preventing, or I should say creating that fear, is how you phrased it in the question, to create a more inclusive city, so.
So the last question that is for everybody before we break you up into,
For Kristen, Michael, and.
yeah, so the last one before we
Lauren.
break them up,
Right,
yep.
okay.
Is, how can we increase inclusion for individuals with disabilities in our community? And it so happens the last three of you all have that view of the school district, but that's fine, so. Yeah.
So Saline has, speaking from a school perspective, Saline has been a destination for families with kids who have different intellectual and developmental disabilities. It's something that Saline does really well. Is it perfect? No. But it is a hub, and it is a priority in our district. One thing that I have been able to do is, with the Sex Ed Advisory Board, is to be able to help adopt a curriculum specifically for intellectually and developmentally disabled kids who are either verbal or nonverbal that can access curriculum for sex education. And these students are specifically geared either in or going into our young adult program for 18 to 26-year-olds, so these are adults. And whether or not we have disabilities of any kind, humans are sexual creatures. And so to be able to have a curriculum that is accessible for learning for you in however you learn is a huge step forward. Our district has also had some issues with seclusion and restraint. And I think there are multiple arenas for discussion there. One is, how does Saline Area Schools report seclusion and restraint? They are more transparent in their reporting. Does Saline Area Schools utilize seclusion and restraint more often than other districts? I don't know the answer to that, but I do know the experience of certain families says that it does happen too often in our district. So being able to look at our policies, look at our practice, and make bridges between policy and action, and make sure that kids are safe, make sure that curriculum is accessible, make sure that our learning is equitable, that kids get what they need, which doesn't look the same from kid A, B, C, D, E. We are all different. And I think I'm going to stop there, otherwise I could keep going. Michael? Yes, I could.
I just want to make sure I understand the question is, how do we increase inclusion for individuals with disabilities in our community? I'm reaching back 40 beyond when I first started my training in education. I'm reaching back to what inspired me from the very, very beginning. Working with young adults with cerebral palsy, young adults with various disabilities, let's just call it that. The names have changed greatly over the years. Before I got involved, terms were such like minimally brain damaged and onward. Every 5-6 years, the terminology will change a bit, but let me just move to the present really quickly and remind you that I'm bringing 42 years of experience working with individuals with disabilities. Modeling, there are 3 areas. One is modeling for a community. We have the Connecting Club, which is the most amazing and remarkable group of young people at our high school who are reaching out and making bridges between students with intellectual disabilities and the mainstream. They have lunches together. They've set up in the overhang under the principal's office. They've got a wonderful bridge, a walkway, and it's become more inviting. They're out of the shadows. We're not in a self-contained area. They're out for the rest of the community to engage with them. And by having these young people model that behavior is a wonderful thing. The next is like the young adult program. I worked closely with them. I love, if you get the opportunity, you got to go to their annual thing, their annual talent event. And all the way up to the Liberty Club for ages 25 and beyond. We have a young man who walks my dog 3 times a week who comes over from the Liberty Club. And I worry about him at times walking the street. He has a certain gait that's recognizable as making him different. And I worry for him. I worry every single day I see him out there. But at the same time, I feel comfortable that Saline is safe and will watch out for him as he's walking the streets. And I don't want us to lose that. So that's where it leads me to the next element, and that's training. I hope we have more and more opportunities to train and talk with each other. Recently, I have been working with a lot of students at Eastern who are what we would call neurodiverse. Students with autism all over different parts of the spectrum. Students who are doing extraordinarily well at the university, but still have issues. I'd like us, that's just one example of the kinds of trainings that we can engage in. The bottom line all seems to go to safety. I want our students to be safe in this community and including them in as many opportunities as possible and modeling for the rest of the community how we can do that is a next step. And I'll leave it at that, knowing that I could probably talk for the next 3 days. Sorry.
Yeah, so I like to think a little bit about ability as not being static, nor are all differences in ability obvious, which is something I think sometimes we don't think about. This is a very fluid thing, and most of us at some point in our lives are going to have some level of being differently abled, and that's hard to think about, but true. So when we're looking at being inclusive toward people with disabilities, we're really looking at being inclusive toward humans and the human experience. To get a little bit more specific, you know, our new bond includes, should it be passed, inclusive play structures. I think that's really important. Play is the work of childhood, and I think that is really important for our youngest learners. Looking ahead, though, I'd like to see more inclusion for our older teens and more opportunities for them to engage with their peers, you know, in extracurricular activities. You know, I think things like the marching band and our music programs do a great job with this. I'd like to see ways where kids can participate and be really included in their teen years. I also think thinking about how we treat the adults who are differently abled in our community, because our kids are always watching, and what we do speaks louder than what we say. So when we're recruiting teachers, we should let our teachers be their whole selves, and if their whole selves include being differently abled, think about the power that has for our students. So I think that is important. I think communication with families is paramount. I've sat in on IEPs, I've been involved in IEPs, 504 plans, making sure that that communication is compassionate, it is collaborative is really important. I think home learning and supports are important, especially when we have kids with different abilities and health concerns that make it not safe for them to be at school during different times in their treatments. And this is something that's really near and dear to my heart. Because if you have a patient who's out because they're immunocompromised for any period of time, they're out of school, it's very difficult to catch up with how fast our academics move. And I deal with this every day, and it's really heartbreaking sometimes. So anything I could do to help kids learn from home. And then that gets to my final point, which is public health and safety. You know, I hate to be the downer always, but you know, we need a school board that is going to listen to public health expert, and we need that for all students, but our students who are differently abled and have different health concerns need us to look out for them as a community. It's incumbent on us as moral citizens to make the setting that they can learn in as safe as we can.
All right, so the next couple of questions are just going to be city officials who are running, and then, again, we'll get to the school board after that. So I'll start off with lack of affordable housing and accessible housing continues to be a significant impediment to our community and the families working towards achieving economic security. What changes would you implement to remedy this? And we'll actually start with Janet, since I've started with Brian. Or actually, I'm sorry, Bob. I'll start with Bob and then go towards the left, yes.
So this way? Okay.
Yes, sorry.
Could you repeat that one more time?
Of course, yeah. So, lack of affordable and accessible housing continues to be a significant impediment to our community and the families working towards achieving economic security. What changes would you implement in the city to remedy this?
Great, and that's a great question. I've actually spoken quite a lot about this issue. The first step would be really taking a look at our master plan and zoning code to see, you know, what changes need to be done. A lot of housing, single-family, large lot housing gets built because that's what we zone for. Taking in that, having community input sessions and how to go forward with those updates would be a good start. I know this is not a quick process, I am aware of that, but it would be years in the making, but certainly looking at the very specific policies that we have on the books would be the very place to start.
So City of Saline has made some really great hires over the last few years. One of them is our Community Development Director. Is that Ben's official title, Community Development Director? Thank you. Thanks, Brian. He is taking a closer look at the affordability of housing in Saline. I sit with him on the Saline Code and Ordinance Review Committee, and one of the things that we are working on currently, baby steps, is creating a policy for alternative dwelling units, ADUs, accessory dwelling units, sorry about that. One of the things that will help with this affordability housing issue that we have is folks who have extra space in their homes can apply to create extra living space, be it rental units, or in some circumstances, we've been approached for folks who have some accessibility issues in their current home, but their garage can be converted to a dwelling unit for someone, for instance, who has dementia. So I think that's a small step in the right direction of affordable housing. I think there are some other things that the city can do when considering developments. The Monroe Street property, I think, is prime real estate for affordable housing or mixed-use housing. And I think that going forward, really taking a deeper dive and working with developers, I think there's a two-way communication that, from my viewpoint, and I haven't sat in all of these discussions, that could be strengthened a little bit now that we have a community development director, between developers or potential developers. We could reach out to potential developers and say, this is what the city of Saline is looking to be. How can you help us get there? So I think that hire is key to this. Once Ben, settles in, he's got a lot of work to do. And with that, I also see an opportunity to take a look at potentially having additional staff in the community development area. And I think having, an official city planner of some sorts, or more of a departmental feel where Ben has some administrative staff, things like that, I think we'll be able to really focus on topics like affordable housing.
Thank you. Well, I'll start by saying I generally don't ever use the word affordable housing because I think affordable is a very relative term. I do like that you said attainable. That's more of a word that I would prefer to use. And the city has, and it continues to make strides in moving towards this. As Ms. Rice indicated, City Council has talked about this, and at the direction of City Council, the code review has taken up the topic of ADUs. It is one avenue to look at. There are changes to zoning, there is some changes in use to other properties, things like that, that can be looked at some point. It's, as with everything in government, it's a process, and we'll move as quickly as we can. The city's in a fantastic opportunity right now with obtaining the 207 Monroe Street property. It now gives us a chance. When that property was first sold, we were in a different place, and we were in a different housing market, and so we have a chance to have a second bite at the apple with that piece. So I'm looking forward to looking at innovative ways to use that space for development. We've seen some things over the years where more of an urban setting where we've got downtown apartment housing and moving into that sort of thing. There's a lot of avenues that we will definitely look at as we move forward. Thank you.
I've served on the Planning Commission most of my career, and we've looked at a number of things in which we've tried to decide how to have attainable housing, and a number of things that we've moved forward on is looking at, of course, development. And when you're looking at new properties coming into our city, and even ones where Ms. Dillon had mentioned 207 Monroe, the idea of looking at smaller footprints, allowing for smaller units. Currently, we have some policies in place, or actual ordinance, that require a home be 900 square feet. Well, we may be able to make something smaller or allow the building and construction of smaller units like that we have seen. The other piece that I think for us in terms of affordability, and that is a term I think comes more into things like water and other utilities and so forth, we need to work with the county. They do provide services. There are tax incentive type things that the county, from what we pay in our taxes to the county, are available for water offset, those type of things which we have looked towards and we support. We don't necessarily need to be the community that's paying and funding everything when we know there's other sources available. What we need to be is the coordinator for that, and to make sure that we have staff and somehow working with the proper authorities and individuals to provide that type of thing. We also, when we look at multi-units, we need to talk about more dense housing, more apartment complexes. But the other thing we also have to provide is quality housing. We have some multifamily units right now that do not reach the limit of what we would expect at a minimum to meet the needs of individuals for the price that they pay and for what they should expect. We are working on a multi-rental and rental inspection ordinance to provide for that, which would not have a penalty, or if there is retribution done by landlords, we will have the authority to make sure that that's taken care of. There's a lot of aspects where we need to not only look towards attainable housing, but quality housing. And I think we're working on that right now, and we'll be changing that quite soon. And with that, again, I think we want to have a city that is attainable. I think we have one of the realization is that Saline is and unfortunately for us, high and expensive community. The median salary, the median things are preventing us from attaining some of the aspects that we would like to be able to achieve, which is affordable housing from perspective of funding and those initiatives. And we'll have to look at those in the future to determine if we can qualify for those, because we do have lower income families in this town, and if we're going to try and maintain and keep a mixture of economic diversity, we have to develop and find ways to do that.
Thank you. This is something that's very important to me, and to Dean's point, when you look at collaboration, I'm the only commissioner in Washtenaw County with USDA-backed affordable housing, so that is something that exists in the rural areas of our community. That said, I think when we look at affordable or attainable housing, there are multi-layers that we need to examine. One of those is, what does that look like in terms of the population? So we need to look at affordable housing for our seniors all the way down to our newer and younger families. So what does that look like within the community, and how does that fit within the community? Another piece when you're looking at creating this type of housing is, how does it integrate within the community, meaning it isn't segregated, it isn't pushed off in this corner or that street. That's where those type of people live, and that's something we've been working on at the county. We actually have a current piece that's going in a partnership with Avalon Housing that will have at market pricing and below market pricing for these houses. And one of the things that I've really fought for is that there be no barriers between the two areas within this property. I actually went to our attorneys because there was a clause that said no fence, and I said, well, what about bushes? And they said, oh, we didn't think about that. And I was like, bushes get really high and they can separate people very easily. So that's another piece. The final piece I think you really need to look at when you're looking at this type of housing is, how close is it to the resources that they need? How close is it to employment? How close is it to transportation? How close is it to the schools? All of these different things come into play when you're looking at housing, and that's something that I feel like we need to take a holistic view of. It's great to have this housing here, but if I have to have a car and maintain a car and car insurance and gasoline at $4 a gallon, all of these things to be able to afford this affordable housing, does that really work? So again, strategically looking at the city plan, I love collaborating from the county as well as different federal resources to be able to expand and make our community great.
Appreciate the question. And I thank Mayor Pro Tem Gearbaugh for touching on our forthcoming rental inspection ordinance, because that's really critical. And that will ensure that all of our tenants, citywide, live in safe and healthy apartments or rental units. I'll try to exercise some brevity here. There's several things that the city can and ought to do, many of which are being pursued at the present time. I've talked about for the better part of a year now the need for an affordability task force and a group that would not just focus on housing, but other issues that impact one's ability to live and thrive in the Saline community. That would, of course, include housing, but it would also include transit, human services, and workforce development. If a task force were to be successful, it would need to include not only city officials, elected officials, but also community advocates and individuals from the county. Mr. Cameron touched on the master plan. That is actually something that we're in the process of renewing right now. And probably later this week, we will announce probably 2 or 3 public forums to engage the public and solicit your input regarding revisions to our master plan. And there certainly will be a focus on multifamily and higher density developments, those that encourage affordable or obtainable housing. Ms. Rice touched upon our code review committee, and I think city council, city government more broadly ought to empower our code review committee to modify and amend local ordinances in ways that encourage more creative or obtainable housing. 2 other things. I've had conversations with the leadership of Evangelical Homes of Michigan about the development of a second Mill Pond Manor. Mill Pond Manor, which exists in the rear of the old hospital campus, was constructed and inaugurated in 1991. It's income-based housing for senior citizens. We have 30 years of data. That facility has maintained a 5 to 6 year wait list since its inception. Demand is high, and there's space in that same vicinity to construct and administer a similar facility. I call it Mill Pond Manor, or I call it Mill Pond Manor number 2, or the annex. And then last, as was touched on by some of my colleagues, the city is going to, in very short order, close on 207 Monroe Street, a strategic property located just beyond our downtown, adjacent to People's Park. And I think a focus of myself and my council colleagues will be to work with the developer to construct obtainable housing, smaller homes, smaller lots that are attractive to young families, individuals who are finishing their higher education, or empty nesters, senior citizens. So there's a lot that can be done and should be done. I've outlined a few, but first and foremost, at least for me, in the next 6 months would be to launch this affordability task force with a focus on housing, transit, human services, and workforce development.
All right, so the last question for those running for city offices is going to be, and again, we'll start with Mr. Cameron, is what policies and programs would you champion that would increase access to geriatric health professionals for older Americans in the community?
I'm taking notes.
That's all right. And I'm reading this question came from someone in the community. It should, I don't know that it necessarily needs to see Americans. It should be for everyone in the community. I just want to point that out. That was kind of weird.
Yeah, and that's absolutely a great question. And again, it comes back to this almost really overlaps the previous question in terms of housing. How can our seniors, age in place? So is there, access to health care? Is, the amenities older folks may need? But beyond that, in terms of how accessible the city is. So a lot of the city is accessible only by automobile if you drive. Not everybody can drive or has the ability. So how can we plan things in a way where, okay, so there's housing near amenities. Again, what kind of, Nicole alluded to accessory dwelling units. Again, having those kind of housing opportunities to that might be helpful for things. I have my personal experience with this in a way is, my dad suffered a stroke a couple years ago, and he now uses a wheelchair. And before this, I never knew how uneven the world's pavement is until you have to push somebody in a wheelchair. So even things like sidewalk maintenance is a huge issue. I'm kind of listing things here that as they come into my head, but it's taking one of my previous answer, going back to the master plan and zoning, is we really need to take this holistic look at what we're building and where and how, and really the things I'm talking about for the geriatric population or seniors really benefit everybody. So I think that's a great place to start.
Thank you. Real fast before you answer, I should have said earlier, we're looking at the clock and we're paying close attention to it. And so I'm thinking if we could limit our question or answers to just a couple of minutes going forward. That'll help us get through and get some questions from the audience. And that way, everyone who's had a long day won't have to be here all night because of us. So thank you again for keeping it.
I tried to answer that one longer because I've been brief.
No, you've been great. I'm just thinking going forward, we just looked at the clock. So thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for this question. My family, my spouse over here, we just went through this with his mother who suffered from dementia. And we went through this during the pandemic, and we realized how scarce resources are. It was very hard to get in-home care. His sister ended up having to move from Chicago into his parents' home to take care of his mother. So we have a lot of experience in understanding how difficult, family dynamics are difficult during the aging process. Having the resources available is difficult. One thing I will say about the city, and I think the question said policies and procedures, I don't think the city necessarily is the all-encompassing keeper of everything from birth to death in the community's lives. But what I will say is the city has the opportunity to connect and to make connections. I could see public-private partnerships where the city could, do the bidding on understanding what the needs are of the community, and these private partnerships could help us fill those needs. Those needs would be things like transportation, in-home care, and when I say transportation, to and from doctor's appointments. And the one thing I will say about Saline in closing is, and I'm learning this, I've learned this over the last year, is Saline is a dementia-friendly city. And I think that's wonderful. And there are some churches in the area who hold classes on aging, planning for aging, what to do if your partner or if your loved one has dementia or Alzheimer's. And I think that the city can help highlight those things, help promote those things. A lot of people don't know about them. So I think that's where the city falls into the responsibility of talking with the community, understanding their needs, and then promoting the things that are available to them, or perhaps reaching out to partners and having partners offer more availability.
Thank you. I'm going to piggyback on what Mr. Cameron said. I'll start by saying we are a multi-generational family household. And with that brings about a whole other lens to look through. Things that I never thought of have become paramount in our lives and really dictate a lot of our daily activities. And it's caused me to look at things differently, and I've had the opportunity to bring that forward to council, and it's been a part of our decision-making process, which I really appreciate that people look at it. As far as things to champion, I will say first and foremost, without question, is transportation. We do not have a bus system here. We don't really have an effective Uber or Lyft system in place. And there are a lot of people that have become housebound because of it. The city does use a service called People's Express. It is very underutilized because it's a very difficult thing to market and what exactly it is. So we are actively looking at alternatives to that. But I think that is a huge first step, because with that brings about that freedom of getting out of the house, to get to doctor's appointments, to get to that social aspect of life, and to become an active community member. The other piece that I said is that I've looked through things with a different lens. Sidewalks, seeing more, instead of stairs, ramps. And I know it's very difficult in a historic downtown because we can't really alter our businesses, and we don't really have the actual sidewalk surface to be able to put in ramps. But figuring out how to do things out of the box. Where our handicap parking spots are. These are sort of low-hanging fruit that I think we could really grab a hold of as a community and really take to the next level. Having more ADA ramps in places where we want to encourage people to cross to get from one place to another. So things like that I'd like to see. We have had well checks from our police offer for those community members that are homebound. And so we can maybe enhance that system at some point. So that's what I would really like to see happen, and those are steps that I would like to see move forward. Thank you.
Similar to what my fellow candidates have discussed, I've looked at a number of these things, even from my own perspective of having two aging parents and understanding, the challenges you face in terms of living at home. I think as a city, we can provide more incentives or even ideas of how to handle code for universal bathrooms, kitchens, those type of accessibilities. Dementia friendly, we've been working with that for the last couple of years as part of the council, and those presentations have come forth. And I think one of the largest things that is a concern, and I could see that from my own parents' experience, is socialization and how to determine how we can keep people connected within the community, not only using our Saline area seniors, but our schools, and also just a lot of the communications. One of the things we struggle right now is really the issue of how do you communicate with individuals that, one, do not use Facebook. This has been an issue for the last 20 years. It's gotten worse. Don't have an iPad or something. We have individuals that are very talented to do that, but we don't have those kind of easy ways to communicate, and we need to start looking at that. One of the things, and even one of our community members has mentioned, is that when we look at, we have a company that's building, driverless buses, the potential that we may be able to implement something of that within the next few years. It may not be something that travels on US 12, but it may be something to help us assist to drive around the community, so at least you're able to go to the grocery stores or go to some of the other areas that allow you to go from your home to go somewhere else. And I think the last thing I'd like to say is one of the real concerns is public safety. And as we're learning from our fire board, that it's becoming increasingly an issue of being able to quickly respond and be able to meet the needs of individuals that may fall and those type of things. So having a communication, infrastructure, and network in place that those individuals can respond quickly without necessarily having to have someone in their home with them is something that we have to look at, so that that type of safety is something that becomes second nature, and it's not something that you have to worry about that because you're in your home that you might fall and not be able to be attended quickly. So, thank you.
Thank you. Also, with aging parents, so echo a lot of what's been said here. The one thing I would say from a policy perspective that we face through Washtenaw County with the health department is actually the caps on the pay for home health care workers. So the Medicare, Medicaid reimbursement for that is a maximum of $15 per hour. So, and again, when we're looking at affordable housing, when we're looking at how do we keep people in these roles so that our seniors can stay in their home and receive the care that they want, and not necessarily just the care that they want, but a consistent caregiver, not this constant turnover that we're facing, we have to, take it up to Lansing, take it up to DC, and fight for these workers that are providing needed care for members of our community for an amount that they can't afford to live on. They can't live in Saline and care for someone in Saline at that type of rate. So that's kind of a policy advocacy lane, if you will. In terms of what we've done at the county, we have two avenues that have actually come recently through ARPA. So we've set aside some ARPA dollars specifically aimed at senior programs and assisting our seniors throughout Washtenaw County. That's one. The second is we've allocated funding for retrofitting 2 buses. So these buses will be used not only by the county, but also by community services to come out into the community. So if Meals on Wheels needs our bus to take hundreds of meals out one day, they can. If we want a literacy organization to bring books to seniors who aren't on Facebook but are reading, they can do that. Everything in terms of vaccinations and wellness checks. We currently do offer that through the county. We actually have a nurse to your door service for those who are homebound and cannot get out. I was recently speaking with a resident who had utilized the service and was so thankful that they were able to receive the care that they needed without being able to leave their home. So that's another space that I'm focused on, is not only transportation, obviously a huge issue, being able to get them places, but if that is too much of a barrier at the moment, how do we bring the services to them and keep them in their homes?
My colleagues and friends gave some great answers. And previously I touched on housing, transit, and human services. Let me say 2 things, that one that was mentioned and one that was not. I've been on the board of the Saline Senior Center since the summer of 2010. It is a great organization that does phenomenal work in the community. But as we look to the future and we see the demographics of this area change and continue to age, we should be ahead of the ball, and we should be thinking about how we can expand and improve amenities at the Saline Senior Center. I think it's a great entity. I think it can be made greater, and I think that should be our collective goal as we look to the next decade. And that means expanding programs and services for seniors of all ages and skill levels. As it relates specifically to healthcare, beginning in 2021, we established a healthcare improvement task force, which is still operating and meeting frequently. And the genesis for that was, as we look backwards over the past 10 years, one of our greatest deficiencies, I would argue our greatest deficiency, has been the lack of quality health care, the closure of our hospital, the exodus of many primary care physicians and specialists from the Saline community. And so as leaders, we need to be working to bring those amenities and services back. That doesn't just adversely impact our senior residents, but all residents. And so a primary focus is bringing back emergency services, primary care physicians, specialists, and labs. We've already spoken to University of Michigan Health System, St. Joe, and Henry Ford. And the first step is gathering data, because that's what these entities want to see. So we've completed one survey. We've got a second survey ongoing. And if you're interested in bringing back those services and amenities to the broader Saline community, I hope you'll fill out that survey, and I hope you'll encourage your family members, neighbors, and friends to do so as well. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to ask the Board of Ed candidates some questions. We're going to start from Dr. Gold and head that way. So we're just going to do 2 questions. The first question is, how can the board assist the district with social emotional learning?
Okay, well, that's another issue near and dear to my heart. So let me just back up. As a pediatrician, every day I talk about social emotional health, and it is important for the schools because healthy kids learn best, and kids who are engaged learn best. And there are a lot of stressors going on for kids these days, as there always have been, but it continues to be an issue. I think the board can value social emotional health, and that's going to mean putting resources toward social and emotional health services. I'd like to see us have more opportunities for counseling within the school setting, opportunities for mental health within the school setting. Some of the supports I talked about academically tie in very directly to mental health and social emotional health. I think building community outside of the schools is helpful for kids. And, you know, as I sit here listening to people talk about people on the other end of life's journey, I think what an amazing resource we have in the community that's changing demographically with our seniors to work hand in hand with our younger people. That adds a whole nother level of perspective to our village. So I think the board can really support the social emotional health of our students by making it a priority and by recruiting the right professional and community health along with family support to help our kids.
I'm going to repeat almost everything you said, but differently. How can we support the board? How can the board support the district? There are a lot of different ways, as Dr. Gold alluded to, is basically showing support for the initiatives that are already in place. And I just made a couple of really quick notes. Funding for mental health is important. More health professionals in the schools, support for training throughout, and more support for counseling. We traditionally in the district have put a lot of our money into the classrooms, and for us, when I say the classrooms, what I mean though is instructional purposes, and that really does include all of the efforts that we're putting into for social emotional learning. Post-pandemic, let's assume we're at the post-pandemic level, and let's be optimistic. The past 2 years have been troubling and difficult for students in this district, in fact, all across the county. And I did want to say something. Last Monday, I attended a workshop with the Michigan Association of School Boards. We had a legislative setting meeting where we talked about what issues should come up to Lansing, what issues should the school boards support. And almost every single table mentioned more funding for mental health issues, support training specifically for mental health workers. And one thing that was interesting is we talked about money for mentors, which is an interesting approach, which is to help pay for mentors for new teachers who haven't had as much experience in dealing with students in crises and in crisis situations, ways of helping the teachers become successful, because if the teachers are successful, the students will in turn be successful, and that's what it really is all about. So I think I did that in under 2 minutes.
I'm going to say everything you guys just said,
All right.
only different. So over the last school year and into this school year, I've had the incredible opportunity to be able to sub in our district for every grade from young fives through seniors. And I ended up spending a lot of time in 4th, 5th, and 6th grade teaching music last year. It was unbelievable. It is an experience that will forever stay with me and has shaped how I look at kids, how I behave with kids, what kids bring to me. I thought I knew all that, and then I spent 40 hours a week with 500 4th graders, and things are different now for me. More support for mental health, absolutely. Our kids all, I would say we all, went through a trauma with the pandemic. We all learned things about ourselves we didn't know we knew or we needed to know, and our kids experienced that too. And now they're walking back into a classroom, having only been on the earth for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, however many years, and they have to figure it all out again, right? They've got to figure out how to be with each other, how to ask for what they need. And this is what social emotional learning is. It is how to advocate for ourselves and for others. It's how to ask for what you need. It's how to tell others what you need for your own success, and having the tools to do that. This is a huge, huge important thing for whole child learning. This is a huge important thing for our kids' 40-hour work weeks at school. It is not instead of math. It is not instead of reading. It is surrounding all of the academics. It's all on the plate in the buffet of what happens for our kids 40 hours a week. We can provide tools for teachers. Teacher work experience is student learning experience. If we give our teachers the tools that they need to be able to handle in the moment crisis that happens, they will have more success in the classroom, which means that our kids have more success in the classroom. We need more mental health professionals inside the buildings for sure. We also need teachers to have the tools in their basket, proverbial basket of tricks, to be able to handle the in-the-moment things. Because let me tell you, having been in the classroom in the last year and a half, there are more in-the-moment things that are happening now than there were 2 years ago. And every adult in that building loves kids fiercely. Every adult in our buildings are relentlessly pro-kid. We need to help them make sure that they have what they need to be able to do their jobs and to live for kids every day. There's more, but I'll stop. Thanks.
So I think one of the most important things we can do is just talk about it and let kids feel that it's okay to talk about it. I think we have a lot to learn about mental health across the board, not just within our district, but within our country as a whole. I also think that while, yes, we want to ensure that we have counselors in the building and that those counselors are available for our students, I don't think we can underestimate the power that the educators that those students interact with every day have when it comes to this capacity. I do completely echo what Kristen was saying in terms of ensuring that our educators have the appropriate training and background to deal with these situations. I've talked to a lot of different educators in the district, and they've talked to me about, obviously not naming names, but situations where students have come seeking help because they feel that maybe they will not have the same level of support in their home environment. And it's very important that those educators are equipped with the necessary tools and be able to have those conversations with these students that are seeking them out. and when they're feeling in need. I also think when it comes to supporting other students, there was a situation at the middle school this year, and they sent a parent note out on it. And I appreciated in that the principal said that, some students had brought this particular situation to light and thanked them without naming names, kind of going on the okay to say mantra within the school. So I think doing more, not calling anyone out, obviously maintaining privacy, but also recognizing when students are engaging in very helpful activities is something that helps everyone's mental health at the end of the day.
Thank you. So Saline area students, obviously we have a lot of, we have diverse learning, we have diverse learners, we have diverse students. How can we best support those needs in the classroom? How can the board support that? How can we support that in the classroom? Do you have any thoughts on that?
So I think that we can support those students by listening to them, by honoring their experience, and by having diverse staff and educators. I think that really would be a priority of mine. I alluded to having, educators of diverse abilities. I think allowing our teachers to be who they are, because there will be kids who will see themselves in those educators. I think exposing kids to a variety of instructional materials and reading materials that can be a mirror toward their lives and also a window into the lives of others to build empathy is important. I think in terms of the diversity of experiences in this district, that is something that I will continuously, having gone to a small rural high school, be impressed by. You walk into the technological high school and, the kinds of classes our students can take is really impressive. And the talented people they learn from are impressive. And I think we just need to continue to look with that lens of honoring the diversity of learning experiences that our students have, and let kids try things out. I mean, when else in your life do you get to try some of the things that you can try out when you're younger? And letting our students learn from each other is important, and that's why it's so important to let them be their whole selves.
I guess it's my turn. A few things. First of all, I don't know if we had, let me speak on behalf of all of us. Thanks for hosting this tonight. It was well done. I appreciate it. First of all, I wanted to say that we have created a position, and the board broadly supported it, of culturally responsive instruction specialist. And she has a very long acronym, Dr. Shannon Washington. And I'm afraid I do not remember all of the letters in the acronym, but it's a remarkable bit of work she's done. How we can support as a board is attending some of those sessions, and I've attended at least two of the three, and found them very helpful, very eye-opening. And another thing that we can do is encourage reading at all levels. This, as Dr. Gold was saying, referred to windows and mirrors. Books are an opportunity for us to see lives of people who we don't experience every day or at all. When I grew up, I was in a rural part of Ontario. We had two different kinds of farmers, the farmers who were Mennonites and the farmers who weren't, and that was the diversity for us. And I know through reading that I learned much more about the world. Through the reading, we can learn about the lives of LGBTQIA issues, like I talked about earlier, neurodiverse students and their perspectives, and so much more. I would also like to say that one of the things that I have done on the board and been strongly in support of is to make the DEI committee a standing committee, making it so it's as important as the finance committee, the standing finance committee, and the policy committee. We also have the DEI committee, and it's burned now into our policies. We don't want it to fade away in the future. We want it to continue to be an important and relevant organization. And if anyone in here serves on the the DEI Advisory Council, thank you, thank you, thank you for your efforts and your work. It does not go unnoticed. Thanks.
Yay. I did just want to point out that I do have her name. So Dr. Washington, her actual title is Director of Culturally Responsive Instruction, Equity, and Inclusion, just so everyone knows who's not in the know of the school district.
So what is our goal in public school? Our goal in public school is to create brave spaces for our students to learn about the world and its people. We have the opportunity in our district to open eyes and celebrate curiosity for what is happening around us in our community, in our nation, and in the greater world. We need diverse educators in our buildings because having diversity within our staff creates better outcomes for every single student. It doesn't create better outcomes just for Black and brown people or just for LGBTQ people or just for baskets of different types of people. It makes better outcomes for every single learner that comes through. It makes higher staff satisfaction. There is no drawback to increasing diversity in a town like Saline, in a town like anywhere USA. So, in order to support our diverse learners, we have to have smaller class sizes. We have to keep that central to the conversation, keep making that our goal. It's a lofty goal because there's a lot of moving parts and pieces that need to happen in order for us to get there. But when we have smaller class sizes, when we give teachers the opportunity to have more robust one-on-one time with their kids or one-on-two time with kids, we have the opportunity to make connections with people of different ages, of different types of people, of different backgrounds, all these different ways that we can celebrate each other within the classroom. Smaller class sizes help us do that. Smaller class sizes provide teachers with that creative art of education where they can do the special things when they are not in the business of survival mode. They are able to create differentiation within the curriculum so that every learner, no matter how they learn, can get to a point where they are hooked in, they are engaged, and they are participating in their education. That's the goal. So how can the board do that? Keep that goal at the center of every discussion, every policy, every decision-making opportunity that comes for the board, and keeping a good relationship with the administration and the staff so that they know we're there for them. We are there for them. Lori?
So fundamentally, I think from a trustee on the board, we have the responsibility of upholding the values and what the district and the policies of the district, right? Which does include the new position, well, new full-time position anyway, for Dr. Washington. And, you know, fundamentally, I had the opportunity to meet with her. She feels like, look, I'm trying to support what the district is trying to do. There's no separate agenda there, if you will. So I think continuing to support the diversity, equity, and inclusion that the district has come up with and the policies that have been instituted are paramount there. I do find it interesting that, and this date could be wrong, this is based on my conversations and research, that the first conversation we started to have around History Months within the district was 2019. And I was a bit surprised that it was 2019 and not significantly earlier than that. I really think that we need to weave these months into our educational curriculum. For example, I mentioned this earlier, it's Hispanic Heritage Month. Like, what are we really doing as a district to embrace that and celebrate that? We may be doing a ton, I just don't have visibility into it and I can't answer the question. But I think it's important because, as I mentioned previously, I feel information and knowledge is power, and I feel without it, you begin to incite fear. And the more that you learn and the more that you understand, then that fear starts to lessen. In terms of different students having diverse learning, aptitudes or capabilities, I really think we need to empower our educators. They show up for our students each and every day. They love our students. They understand differences in learning styles and aptitudes, and they're really at the forefront to enable those good decisions. I also think there needs to be open communication with parents. No one knows a child better than a parent does, and parents need to have say and feel as though that they have a voice and they have power to influence and make sure that their students have the best learning opportunities within the district.
Thank you so much. All right.
So our formal questions are over, but we would like to take the opportunity to ask any of the members that came in tonight to ask a question. Does anyone have a question they'd like to ask any of the candidates? You do, come on up, Leah.
Hello, I'm Leah Hogan, and I am a resident of the Saline area. I have a child who's in the middle school currently. I'm curious, I've been looking at a lot of demographic data recently, and I know that's been a topic that's come up in several of your answers this evening. And I'm really interested in getting some perspective, and this is kind of an open question to all of you, about what we can do as a community to work across leadership. So I'm talking about, the county commission, school board, city, township, in order to essentially create a more welcoming place for economic development and for diversity. Because I see that we have some economic challenges that, to a certain extent, we need to grow our way out of. And to do that, we need to be able to attract people who have more diverse backgrounds to be here. And that needs to be a partnership across, all of the organizations here. I know from the school board perspective, there's representation in many of those settings. But I'm not aware as a citizen of any formal activity that really is about essentially saying, how do we attract more, for example, teachers of color to the district? There's, I think, only one black teacher in the whole district, and I think that that's a problem. It's an affordability problem, it's a perception problem, and it's something that I don't think the school board can solve itself. So, open question, I know it's a long one, but something that I know I would like to see worked on.
Eventually, Leah, thank you. What a great question. We're gonna all unpack different parts of it, I'm sure. But eventually your question's gonna touch on the teacher shortage. It would be wonderful to hire a more diverse staff. 10 years ago, when a fifth grade position would open up, we might have had as many as 60 applicants, wide range of folks applying. Now, we might be lucky to get 5 to 10, depending on the position. We were also very close to not starting this year with a couple of unique or niche positions that we were unable to fill. So that's one of the issues slowing us down from that work of diversifying our teaching population. I'll just leave it at that and see if anyone else has more to add.
So I'd like to take a little stab at this. I'm a federal government employee, and with the new administration came new requirements and activities related to DEIA, we call it in the federal government. Accessibility is separated from inclusion. Just thought I'd throw that out there. So I sit on a committee of about 50 staff that represents over 1,000 very diverse, both geographically, diverse at levels within the organization, diverse at job tasks within the organization. And as a co-chair this past year, a couple of things we implemented were we created diverse hiring panels. So you could sign up using a tool all across the country, and you can sit on a hiring panel for something that has nothing to do with your job, probably has nothing to do with the location you sit within. But these create opportunities to alleviate some of the bias that comes into hiring for something that you know a lot about, or someone that you know a lot about. The second thing that we're working to install is an incentive program to get people from, so the laboratory that I work in a laboratory, a research laboratory, is located here in the Great Lakes. How do we get the best and brightest from around the country, from around the world, to relocate themselves to Michigan? So we've created different types of incentive programs, a lot of which revolves around money, of course, relocation expenses. Now with COVID, some of these incentives are remote work as well, remote work opportunities. So I think there are a lot of things that the city, the community, the schools can sit down and sort of brainstorm about as far as incentives to bring people in. And then lastly, I think we need to take a look at, like you mentioned, the demographics of the city. I don't know if there's a good study out there, but I do know that our new community development manager is looking at the demographics of the city to better understand which populations we are communicating with, which populations are communicating back to us, and understanding what those needs are. Who are the people in our community, and who do we not have representing those people in our city services? Our city administration is very white. Our schools are very white. None of us are shy about saying that. We all recognize it. We all see it. What do we do about it? And again, I think it goes back to, fundamentally getting people here by incentivizing and by having these diverse panels to better understand what we need, what the needs of people who want to come work and live here are. And I think that's the first step in creating more diversity. And the more diverse we get, the more diverse people will want to join. But like I said, the first step is understanding what we are as a community, who we are, and then doing different types of things to reach out to bring others into our community.
One thing I heard Nicole say was the incentive. Why do people want to come here? I think one thing that we, and I say this as city, community, schools, because we're all connected, is we need clear expectations for our city. We need clear messaging across the board so that when people say, well, what is Saline about? Any person within our community can be like, this is what we're about and this is what we believe. And right now I feel like we have a lot of fracture within what that message would be. I think that we all need to work together to educate not just students in the school, but the families and the community members who maybe don't have kids in school, so that a city council member and a school board member would be able to message out the same thing for Saline. And once we have that message very clearly ingrained into the fabric of our community, is we go out to other places. We go out to the places where there are people who are Black and Indigenous and brown and LGBTQ and say, we want you here, we need you here. This is why we want to grow our diverse population. We've got to go out and do it. We can't wait for them to come here. Because who wants to live in Michigan if you live in California or in, like all these different places? Like, we need people to want to be here. And part of that is going to be messaging.
Was it Leah? Is that correct? Yes. I think you made some excellent points. Let me add just a few things. There are occasions where we can look to the past to help develop solutions for the present. And I'm going to date myself with this one. But when I was a 7th grader, I was a member of the Saline Community-Wide Planning Initiative that was launched in the spring of 1998. And actually, the then superintendent, Ellen Ewing, was really the catalyst for that. And some really tangible things came out of that process, including CARES, CQC, the new high school, and Harvest Elementary. And that was a broad coalition of city and township residents, elected officials, business leaders, nonprofit executives, community advocates, et cetera. And I actually began talking about this in 2019. I think a very similar process to what was initiated in 1998, nearly 25 years ago, would benefit Saline today in essentially 2023. With focus, with breakout groups or primary focuses on schools, economic development, recreation, diversity, and inclusion. I think we've reached the point where we need to, the term has been bantered about here liberally tonight, and I think it's good. We need to think about these issues holistically and develop a community-wide plan and not be siloed by schools, city, business community, chamber, et cetera. Again, I think it was a worthwhile initiative 25 years ago, and I think it would have merit today in the waning months of 2022.
And I'd like to tag in on the mayor, because we've had success in the last few years of bringing more citizens in terms of doing task force and committees, where we've had more input from the individuals providing the actual feedback instead of it being among just the elected officials. I mean, even just recently, I've had talked with Steve Lesh, our superintendent of schools, about the exact thing that the mayor was mentioning. I also think we as a community in the last 2 years need to recognize the success that even the city has had. I mean, we have achieved a lot of gender equity concerns. We have a female city manager. We have a female engineer. We have a female police chief. Those are all champions that we have not, had in the past and brought forward. We've also hired people of color in our police force and those individuals. So we're now starting to represent a lot more incentive to bring those type of individuals. Even LGBTQ people we brought on board. So when we do that, we need to recognize that and show the community that we do mean it, and we do have people that want to be here. We are not a community that does not welcome everyone. We are a community that wants to bring people aboard.
I'm going to come at this from two different spaces. So my background is in economic development, so I've got that hat, and then I also have my county commissioner hat. So as our county commissioner, we have many boards and task forces. In fact, Peter would be very upset with me if I didn't say we have 25 right now with at least 50 open seats, if any residents would like to join and give their time to become involved. One of those that I'm on is the Michigan Works. It's a talent workforce. And so at the table, we have local elected officials, we have business leaders, we have higher education all coming together. My day job is at that place where we say, go blue. And one of the things that we see is not only do we attract talent to the greater Saline area, Ann Arbor area, but then they go away. And that can be local talent that wants to go to the coasts, and that can be coastal talent coming here and then going back to the coasts. And so that's where the economic development hat kind of comes into play, and that's talking about quality of place. So what do we offer here that incentivizes them to stay here? And I'm not talking about dollars. That is one piece of the puzzle, but again, through economic development, what we really need to focus on is how do we not only attract, but retain them here, because anyone else can offer them a salary and match and all of those different things. So what does the infrastructure look like? What do our schools look like? What does transportation look like? What does housing look like? All of these things come into play when we're talking about this, when we're talking about attracting that one teacher. It sounds very complex, but those are all of the pieces of the puzzle that come together. Also, when we're looking at those professionals have spouses or partners. So where are they? Where are they going to be employed? Where are they going to live? Where are their children going to go to schools? Or if they're bringing a parent with them, what type of senior services do we have to offer? So it all interchanges and all comes together. So I really appreciate your point of bringing everyone to the table and not just being siloed in these different areas. And that is something that I enjoy as a county commissioner, is working with my cities and townships as well as my schools to really create a place where I want to live and I want my children to live too.
I'd like to just very briefly add to answer Leah's question. I think some of it is that we each, sitting here in this room, each voter needs to show up for diversity. We need community buy-in, and we need it to be vocal, and we need to decide whether we are going to be future-focused, and we need to say that this has value. It clearly does, right? It has economic value, it has moral value, it has value. But we need to say that, and we need to not be afraid to say that, and we need to let our neighbors and the people around us in our community know first by our actions, by our words, that it matters to us. And, I'd like to thank the SPAR and Saline Supports for giving me the opportunity to say, this matters to me. And I think our voters will have a chance in November to say, we are going to elect candidates and pick candidates who say that this matters to them. And so if we want to be good neighbors to a diverse group of people in the community, we can put into action people who make diversity a priority.
I'm just going to add one thing really quick. I'm going to say 3 words, and it's awareness, education, and action. But now I'm going to put in front of that intentional. And that's the piece that we need to focus on, because if we have an intentional action, if it's a group that comes together across the board and says, this is what we want to be, this is who we want to be, that can make it, that's where it'll happen.
We can move forward, yeah.
Also a part of the city DEI, as well as sex ed board. I love being active and helpful to my community, but unfortunately a lot of students my age don't know how or don't even know where to start. And so this leads to my question, is that everyone says they're interested in the voice of students, but most of the time policies are made without really thinking or asking for student voices. And so do you value student voices, and how would you encourage student involvement is my question.
I'm gonna jump on that one if everybody's okay. All right. So I was happy to inaugurate the first youth commission for Washtenaw County. So we have representatives from every district come together and not only learn from one another. So when we're talking about diversity, we're bringing students together from schools where normally, they're seen as adversaries, right? Your team competes against this team, but now all of a sudden you're on the same team, and that team is Washtenaw County. But not only do they come together and learn about the issues that our community is facing as a whole, they advise the board. They bring together a presentation to us, and we listen to that, and it matters to us. It helps us to inform our decisions that we make for the county, for our future. So that's just what I want to say. Also a plug for our youth to join the Youth Council. Please apply. I love seeing my District 3 representatives.
So I'd like to take a minute to answer as well. So thank you for your question. I appreciate it. 1,000,000% yes. I would absolutely want to hear more from students. One of the things through meeting with different educators, administrators, teachers in the district that I've learned is I think there's a lot more, I guess I would say, racism, bigotry going on in the district than, I have 2 children in the district, both of them middle school, I didn't mention that earlier, but that we parents don't necessarily understand. So I was under the impression that each time there was this type of an incident in the district that parents were informed that an incident occurred. But through this process, which has been a continuous learning process for me, I've learned that's not the case because of confidentiality and protecting the victim as well as protecting the confidentiality of the offender. due to age and the fact that we're dealing with minors. So that was very eye-opening to me. The students are the boots on the ground. They understand the temperature in the classroom. They understand the temperature in the buildings that they're in, much more than a trustee sitting on the Board of Education can. And I would say absolutely, I would want to hear more from you all. I also think that we need to be walking the buildings more. We need to be boots on the ground more in the buildings to understand what you all are dealing with as students and use that to help generate conversations around, are there certain policies that need to be reformed? Are there new policies that need to be introduced? I don't think these are things that can be done in a vacuum. I think these are things where we should solicit the support from the subject matter experts, and those are the people that are in these buildings every day.
Ari, it's been a really great opportunity to get to work with you on the Sex Ed Advisory Board. Your voice has been really important in the process, and I'm really appreciative and grateful of you giving of your very busy high school time. We all remember what it was like to be in high school, to be part of that process. I really appreciate that. I agree with what Lori said. We need to come to you. We can't wait for you to show up and say, oh, hey, I have an issue. We need to come to you. When Lori talked about being boots on the ground in the buildings, that's true. And we have to let you know how to get in touch with us. And we have to let you know it's okay to be honest. It's okay to tell us hard things. We don't want to just hear about the wonderful things that happen in your high school or your middle school or your elementary school. We want to know the tough stuff too. And we want you to know that it's okay to tell us that stuff too, and we're not going to be upset, and we are not going to think differently of what the high school is like, but we will know more than we did before you told us. So I think the grown-ups at this table promise to come to you to say, what do you need? What is your experience? And then take that back with us into the adult sphere and put that to work.
Yeah, I do have two really quick things to add. Thanks, Ari, for those great notes. Two things, two positive things. The school board meetings in the last couple of years have really worked hard to prioritize student voices. At least putting you up front and hearing student showcases. I mean, that's a small start, but it's an appreciable step, I think. In January 2020, I started my role as the Washtenaw Association of School Boards. There are 9 school boards in all of Washtenaw. And we came up with this great idea to have a countywide youth forum. We had $10,000 at least to spend. We thought we could bring in a great speaker, have some good food, bring in representatives like you from schools all across the 9 districts. It was very, very exciting. And then the pandemic happened. And that drove everything to a grinding halt. But last week we had a meeting at the Washtenaw Association of School Boards, the executive, and we said it's time to start reconsidering it and bringing it back again. So I really hope that within a few months we'll be able to have some sort of an announcement that says, hey, and I hope an invitation comes to you, because if we were asked, who would you pick from your district, you'd be at the top of the list, that's for sure.
Thank you. Thanks for being here, Ari. I will echo what everyone said about wanting to hear from students. And I also just want to honor that the student experience is as diverse as the parent and teacher experience. And I know that there's not one voice of students. It's not like students think this. And there's not one developmental stage of students either. So it's not an easy task to listen to students because you're listening to a lot of different people with different interests. But we can start by listening. We can start by confidentiality, and we can start by looking for patterns and starting with kindness and trying to find common ground and then act. So when we're hearing from students, we need to take it seriously. We need to look for patterns in what we're hearing from students, and we need to act in the best interest of those students. And we need to watch out especially for our most vulnerable students.
Yeah, I'll from a city council perspective, input from students and young people is crucial. Decisions the city of Saline makes are long-reaching decisions. What gets built where will have an impact 20, 30, 40 years. I mean, there's buildings that are over 100 years old that are still here. So the question is, what gets built where? How will that affect traffic? In 10 years, is that traffic going to be self-driving? I don't know. So that's where I think really having that perspective of young people, how do we go forward to help guide us? Yeah.
And I'd like to say, we have our youth council, which we've developed, and I think over the last few years, just like everything else, because of the pandemic, we haven't had that ability to have that connection and so forth. And I think now with the initiatives and incentives of the individual students that participate, they're the ones that can drive that and bring that information to us. And I think we need to empower them more from that perspective. And our representatives from council and our representatives that are staff of ProShet, I've found that that would be a great avenue for us to now invigorate a little bit more. And as that aspect, dealing with the issues that you just mentioned, and hopefully we can have some more of that in terms of feedback into the council.
Yeah, I'm glad that Councilmember Gerbach pointed that out, because the city council representative to the youth council is sitting in the audience right now. You know, I'm very surprised as I get more active in City of Saline government and other community organizations. Let me take my mask off. I just realized that y'all can't see my face. You know, the youth show up. When we have special events, when we have special recognition events, when we have certain activities and feedback events, the youth are the ones that are showing up. And I think that that's really important, because I think that that is the future, you know, the youth are the future, but that's the future of Saline. If we talk about incentivizing people to come here, we should incentivize people to want to stay. You know, we have lots of colleges and universities and technical schools and trade schools for our youth to attend in the area. And wouldn't it be wonderful if they grew up involved in their community and brought that back and raised their families in their community? And I see that with this generation. This generation is a lot more active than my generation, than your generation. It reminds me a lot of, you know, the generation of, you know, the 60s and 70s. Everybody was very involved, lots of activism happening. And I didn't grow up with that. I didn't grow up with a lot of activism. I didn't grow up feeling like I had a voice. I just kind of did what my parents told me to do, and I filled out the form, and I went to college, and I did this, and I did that. But having youth like you involved, Aria, I think is really the key to the future of Saline. And I would encourage our youth to be involved with things like looking at our city planning for the future, coming with your voice, what you would like to see in the next 10, 20, 30 years of the city. Because as we've mentioned multiple times tonight, the city and the schools are really one when it comes to this community. And we can't have divisions in policy. We can't have divisions in how we talk about one thing here and one thing there. It all needs to mesh together for all of us to build this community that people want to come to and people want to come back to and stay in.
Thank you. Okay, so I know that we've got one more person in the audience who wants to ask a question, and we'll just keep it brief so that we can all, two? Okay. Oh. You want to get in line? I think, no. You want to, okay, all right, go ahead.
Hello, Tran Longmore, 325 Lewis Street, Saline, Michigan. I was just wondering, I think, you know, I've heard a lot about DEI over the last few years, and I grew up in the social justice movement. One thing that's really lacking in Saline's DEI movement that I can see is talk about people who grew up in the working class, people whose moms work at Speedway and make next to minimum wage. So I guess my question is for city council candidates. What are you going to do to help keep this city affordable for these residents who want to live here, want to send their kids to these schools, and hope for the best outcomes just as you do? And my question for the school board candidates is, when are we going to start talking about these kids and the challenges they face as important as all the other kids we talk about in the last 3-4 years as DEI has become an important issue in the school. And I think DEI is a super important issue, but we're really selective about what we talk about, and I'd like to see that change.
Does anyone want to answer that?
I mean, if you don't mind, I can start. I appreciate the question, Tran. I actually spoke to economic equity in an earlier response, but from a city's perspective, there are several things we are either actively pursuing or will pursue in the not-too-distant future. One, again, would be the establishment of an affordability task force focusing not just on obtainable housing, but also transit, human services, and workforce development. We talked earlier this evening about additional steps, policies, and initiatives the city could pursue to encourage obtainable housing in the Saline community. I also think a big issue for people who are economically disadvantaged, and actually all of us, as I articulated earlier, is access to quality healthcare amenities, which are so desperately lacking in the broader Saline community. So that's why we need to continue to keep a focus on our healthcare improvement task force and work diligently to bring back emergency services, primary care physicians, labs, and specialists to the Saline community. I'm sure my council colleagues or council candidates will have other things to add as well.
I mean, I would contribute with that too, and I think one of the things that Mayor Morrow has mentioned is that we need to be able to coordinate, as we said before, the services with the county to be able to provide those kind of access and things to affordability or to assistance that are out there, and even from the state's perspective. We also, though, talked about quality housing and making sure, as I will repeat again, is that those individuals that feel they are not able to live in a decent place or have an issue with a landlord or whatever, we need to be able to, as a city, be able to step up to the plate and say, yes, we're here for you to make sure that you're living in a reasonable place, a place that has water, it's safe, it's not mold infested, all of those type of things. And I think we realize that significance in this last year and those complaints and concerns, and we will not tolerate the type of landlords that will allow that to occur. And those are the type of facilities that need to be addressed, and we as a city can do that.
I think one of the things that happens when we talk about DEIA, as I like to call it, is that people focus on equity from the why does this person deserve more than that person standpoint. Equity is let's level the playing field. What are the things that are at a disadvantage in someone's life that we can help with to just level that playing field out? One example of this is during the pandemic when the schools were closed and online learning took place. It wasn't just the black and brown kids who could not get onto the internet. It was kids in rural areas. It was kids whose mothers are working more than one job and taking care of multiple mouths to feed. Equaling that playing field, creating accessibility to the internet, accessibility to environments where there weren't toddlers running around while they were trying to listen into class. That sees no color. And I think we get caught up in thinking about DEIA from literally a black and white perspective. But what we need to focus on and what we need to communicate better as people working in DEIA fields is our focus is not necessarily on color. It's on color if that's our disadvantaged population. But it's the whole population that is not seeing the equitable distribution of assets, of resources that we need to focus on. In this community, we have multiple segments. So I think maybe on the surface, it looks like we're not talking about those different segments, but I know, especially in the schools, and especially with some of the policies that we're looking at in the cities, that those segments of the community are being looked at. Now, what I do feel like we need to do is get a better assessment of the different segments of the community. And we did talk about this a little earlier, Tran, in things like affordable housing, transportation, access to resources that are not necessarily divided by color, gender, economics. It's just creating a level playing field for every human being to begin with.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
I'd like to roll over the school board. Thanks, Tran. I'm not sure that I agree with the premise 100% that we don't, I gotta see your face, sorry. That we don't, yeah, I know, it's just, I can't, if I can't see your lips move, yeah, thank you. That we don't talk about it at the school board, because I know we do, but it's not necessarily, I got it. Let me give you some examples, though, that we don't necessarily do it in public as much as you might imagine. I'm going to say the same phrase a few times. Equity equals excellence. And when we talk about equity here, we have had many conversations about affordable housing and who is living in Saline when we talk about our student population. But more so, let me give you two solid examples where equity equals excellence. One of them is the Chromebook program. When we decided to move in, make sure every student had a Chromebook, there were a lot of students who, I think about 60 at the time, who could not afford it. We made sure everyone had a Chromebook. One of the issues that came up very quietly in one of the first conversations we had with parents was, I don't want my kid's Chromebook looking different. I don't want to have a tag on it that says, this is for the poor kid. We made absolutely sure everyone had a Chromebook, and they looked, anyone who got one from the school got one that looked just like all the rest. Another example is we've been working at trying to reduce the cost for participation in sports. I grew up in a family with not a lot of money and 3 kids. If one of us could afford to go and play on a sport, that was great. If the second one wanted to as well, someone was out of luck. And we get that. We don't want costs of participating in sports and other activities to be an issue. We don't make a great big fuss about it because no one wants to be told, yeah, we're going to subsidize your trip, kids. But there are a lot of subsidized trips out there. Nobody gets left behind. As far as, and we have those conversations, and I really appreciate it. But I think, Tran, is what I'm hearing from you is we need to have more, and they need to be more public, and I get it.
Piggybacking on Michael, I think we need to normalize need in our communities. I think we need it to be normal to ask for help when we need it. There are some really great things that schools can do. One is you can make cute names for it, but like a needs closet. It has snacks, it has a pair of socks, it has underwear, it has tampons and pads, it has general consumable items that kids might need that they don't want to ask for. I can't think of anything my middle schooler would like to do less than be different from another kid right now. It's part of the middle school process. It's part of high school, don't you think? You don't want to look different from other people. And so to get to a point where you have to look at someone and say, I don't have a snack when you're a second grader, or I don't have a pad for when I have my period or whatever. We don't want kids to not ask for what they need or not feel like they know how to get what they need. These are small ways that the school can normalize need for every kid. It doesn't matter who you are, who your parents are, where you live. If you need a snack, you get to have another snack. If you don't have a tampon, you can grab a tampon. Normalizing need creates that leveling of the playing field that Nicole was talking about, that creates equitable solutions for every single kid that's in the district, whether it's a Chromebook or laundry within the schools for kids who need to be able to do that. We have opportunities to normalize need.
The other thing is that this is not an either-or question. The truth is that if you look at the country, these issues are overlapping. So tonight we talked about accessibility, we talked about kids' social emotional needs, we talked about race, we talked about LGBTQI kids. And the truth of it is that all of those identities overlap and overlap significantly. So if we build schools and communities that are inclusive, we help the kiddo whose mom works at Speedway, who very likely just by virtue of being a human, may at some point in their life carry one of those other identities. I spoke a little bit early about the fluidity of ability. There's also fluidity of economics. If we build kind, inclusive schools that care about mental health, that is going to help lift everyone up. And I think the kinds of structures and initiatives that we talk about that will help kids with their social emotional health, that will help kids in special education, will often also help all kids.
Can I just tag in really quickly? I just want to talk about bias for a quick second. That's an issue that is sort of something we didn't talk about too much tonight, but I really want to bring it up in a couple of different points. One is that I know as the chair of the drug task force, people in this community would say to me, we don't have a drug problem here. And then we would show them the fire runs and the police runs. And they would say, oh, it's those people. It's that neighborhood. It's this, it's that, it's not us. And people would not identify with that in any means. And anyone that knows me knows that I always look for the good in any situation. I try to get a lessons learned. And from the pandemic, what we learned was about Saline Area Social Services. That was another one of those things that people said, oh, that's for those poor kids. That's for those people that don't have jobs. That's, there was fill in the blank. It was for those. And then the pandemic happened, and they opened their doors to everyone. And people were like, wow, I don't have to show that I have a reason to be here. I can just go. And from that, their numbers have grown exponentially since that, because people have now found a comfort in saying, you know what, I don't have to be embarrassed about going. I don't have to prove to somebody. I don't have to hide it. And that's where we're normalizing it. And that's where we're bringing that bias to light and getting people to understand at this point that it's there, but it's a hurdle we can overcome. We just have to acknowledge it.
Yeah, I'm going to kind of piggyback on that really quickly. So just normalizing services. So everybody rides the school bus. It isn't necessarily, oh, you're a poor kid, so you ride the school bus because your parents can't drop you off. That's just something that's been normalized. When you look at county services, when everyone wanted to go get their COVID-19 vaccination, it wasn't, oh, you went to the health department and you went to your doctor. It was you went and got your COVID-19 vaccination. That was it. Again, it was equalizing things. In the schools, it was free lunches for COVID-19. Again, it wasn't this kid can afford lunch, this kid can't afford lunch. That's one thing that I'm looking at a county perspective. There was a case study years ago. I'm going to get the city of Ohio wrong. It was either Cleveland or Columbus, but they needed to get workers downtown. And all of these employers came together and they pooled to allow their employees to ride the buses for free. The program was so successful that everyone rode the bus for free. You didn't have to prove you were an employee. You didn't have to prove that you had a doctor's appointment. You didn't have to prove anything. You just got to ride the bus for free. And it brought so much prosperity to the downtown that they kept it up and they kept it going. And these employers, everyone from, the little mom and pop bakery to the big corporate office, contributed what they could to keep this going. So looking at those different, again, public-private partnerships, but really equalizing things. So it isn't, oh, you have that because you are poor or because you live there or because you have this, making it, again, accessible to everyone.
I do think as part of our social studies curriculum, we do, not necessarily specifically within our individual community, but we do explore different economies, different economics, living on less than, $1 or $5 a day as an example. But, I would agree with you that we want to avoid anyone feeling any level of not being supported within the school district or within the community. I know there's a lot of angst right now because I have a 6th and an 8th grader, and so there's fundraising for Chicago and there's fundraising for Washington DC. And for certain families, that's an extremely stressful situation. And, you know, the fundraising items are quite pricey, so that's not necessarily, you know, a perfect way to raise funds for everyone. I feel that we do live in a very generous community, and I feel like if we got some level of, you know, grassroots to say we need to fund X amount of dollars for students to be able to go on the Chicago trip or students to be able to go on the DC trip, I feel like our community would step up and give. I just think it's a bit of a black hole to a lot of the citizens in terms of what the need is and what you can do to help support, from my opinion.
Yeah, just real quickly, I just want to add, in urban planning circles lately, the last couple of years, the idea of the 15-minute city has developed, meaning that all the amenities and requirements that you need in your life is within a 15-minute walk of your home. Doctor, schools, library, cafes, whatever you need. And I'm bringing that up here just because car ownership is often an extra burden of cost that many people have to endure. And so to the extent that we can, address this through any policy reforms at the city level to help remove that burden the best we can, I think is something we should explore.
Just gonna do this really fast. I know it's getting late. I know a lot of us have kids at home and have been texting me the last 10 minutes. So thank you for doing this one last question.
Hi, Kevin Camaro-Sulak, Saline resident, city council member. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank all of you for coming here this evening and taking the time and being so well prepared for questions that you didn't know were coming. It's great to see these conversations and how we come together. I have to say I'm fortunate to be the city rep for the Saline Youth Council and the DEI committee. And there are members of the DEI that are also on the youth council. And the youth council also has a couple members that are on the healthcare improvement task force. So our youth are really interested and involved. And some of them know that they will be listened to. But part of what I've garnered from our discussions is we have to value our youth's thoughts, opinions, and we have to let them know that we want to hear them and that it's safe. It's a safe, whether you want to say it's a safe place or that, hey, we want to know. I'm not going to advocate for another survey, but we could put out a survey for, just for students. So, but I'm not going to say that. So, I was going to ask a question, but, I think asking another question of like a couple words or one sentence to sum up tonight's forum, was going to be my question. So if the sponsors of this event would, I'll leave it up to them. But thank you all seriously for coming, and I wish the rest of the school board candidates could have been here too. There were a couple more seats available, and this was really a good gathering. So thank you.
Thank you. Just since you brought up the other candidates, we did invite everybody that's running for the other offices. Some people just said that they weren't able to make it. But I'd like to point out that we did do a written question and answer to everybody, and everybody minus 2 people did fill that out. So starting tomorrow, we're going to start with the Board of Education candidates. We'll put those out on their social media, the Saline supports, as well as the Saline Parents Against Racism. We'll be tagging your social medias, and I think it sounds like there's going to be a lot of community members who are going to be asking for clarification and more input on some of the questions that you've asked. So I appreciate all of you answering that in addition to attending tonight. So tomorrow, we're going to put out the Board of Education, and then on Wednesday, we'll put out the city candidates as well. And then again, I want to thank everyone out here for coming. And again, this has been streamed online, but you will be able to see it again. I think by tomorrow, it'll be up again to the video. So yes, confirmation.
We
So
have
we'll
a few hour delay for it to get uploaded,
Yeah.
but once it gets uploaded, it'll be up there through the election cycle.
So we're going to have links to that as well, and then we're also going to have some paper copies that we're going to distribute at places like the Senior Center and Saline Area Social Services, where sometimes paper copies are a little bit easier for people to have accessibility to. So again, we just want to thank everyone up here for taking your time to be here and for wanting to make our community a better place.
Seriously, thank you for taking the time, not only to be here, but also to get involved in your community and to run. It takes a special person to commit to this, and to the years of service that it would be to, should you be elected. So we do seriously very much appreciate that.
Thank you for organizing.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a great night, everybody. Drive
You as
safe.
well.